On this Sunday night, more classroom COVID concerns.
They're not prepared to have that start on Monday, and that worries me.
As some schools shift online and others press ahead with in-person learning. Rangers respond to remote areas hard hit by COVID.
I'm surprised that it's taken this long.
A military boost for Bearskin Lake First Nation. Is it too little too late? Africa's iconic initiative, combating climate change by planting a wall of trees. But will it work? Reunited at last. How an Afghan baby boy is back with his parents after their split-second decision to hand him to a U.S. soldier.
Global National, reporting tonight, Mitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After an extended Christmas break triggered by surging cases of the Omicron variant, students across much of Canada will return to school tomorrow. Most students will be back to online education, but in Western Canada, schools will be open for in-person learning once again. Most doctors agree opening schools should be a priority for kids, but keeping those classrooms open may be more challenging. Heather Yourex-West has our top story tonight.
For the first day back after winter break, Martina Stasiuk is planning to call her kids in sick.
Neither of them are feeling the greatest right now, so that is being responsible on my part.
But the Calgary mom, who also works at a local preschool, worries the province is heading back to in-person learning too fast.
They want us to do testing and different masks, but they're not prepared to have that start on Monday. And that worries me.
While most of the country has switched to online learning, students will be back in physical classrooms across BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Yukon, and parts of the Northwest Territories. Though parents in BC and Alberta have been warned schools could be closed or there could be a sudden shift to online learning if Omicron cases continue to rise.
So we've certainly given parents a heads up that we could potentially be in situations where, in specific cases or specific context, where schools or classes or grades are moving online.
The Alberta government has promised to distribute better masks and rapid antigen test kits to every student once they return to class. But many schools have not received deliveries yet. Rapid tests will be available for BC students as well, but not until much later this month.
I think we're going to see a fair amount of chaos over the next little while. I don't think we're going to see necessarily a large amount of severe illness or bad outcomes, but I think there will definitely be a fair amount of chaos.
Dr. Lenora Saxinger says recent data out of the UK involving school-aged children is encouraging. Despite a high number of infections, the number of children hospitalized because of COVID has remained very low.
Given that a lot of kids have been vaccinated or previously exposed and that the risk of severe outcomes is low, I think that for a lot of people, it is okay to contemplate sending your child to school.
The benefits of in-person learning to a child's social and emotional well-being cannot be overstated, but those benefits must once again be weighed against COVID's risk to their physical health. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
A remote COVID-stricken First Nation in northwestern Ontario is going to get some military help, but not as much help as it asked for. Bearskin Lake First Nation is about 600 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. More than half of the community's 400 residents have tested positive, and nearly the entire community is now in self-isolation. David Akin reports.
On Saturday, 3 Army Rangers from CFB Borden in southern Ontario flew to Bearskin Lake for the day to assess what resources a full military deployment would need. The community in Bearskin Lake had asked for as many as 40 military personnel ready to stay for up to 14 days.
They would have to come up with their own tents. That's how bad it is in this situation in my community.
It has been a week since the chief asked for military help after declaring a state of emergency in late December.
I'm surprised. That it's taken this long and so slow, the progress that's been taken so far.
But finally, on Sunday afternoon, the federal government said it would send help. The government said 4 Army Rangers are going in now and an unspecified number later. But the community says they've been told 3 now and 3 later for a total of 6. In any event, A community spokesperson said they are disappointed with the response and still feel overwhelmed and unsupported. The 40 soldiers that the community had asked for are needed to spell off exhausted volunteers and exhausted community leaders like the chief, who tested positive himself for COVID-19 on Saturday.
I'm okay at the moment, but I wasn't feeling too good this morning, but I think I'm starting to feel okay now.
The chief got sick even though he has had his booster. In fact, 80% in the community are fully vaccinated. Because of that, there have been no serious illness, at least so far, that required medical evacuations. Still, with all but 20 or 30 of the community's 400 residents locked in self-isolation, there is an urgent need for people who can supply wood, food, and medicine, and to provide relief for the community's nurses. There are less than half a dozen looking after 200 sick people.
I have elderly parents at home that they've been tested positive, and there's nobody to look after them. But I'm grateful that nurses go and check upon them once a day.
Bearskin Lake, though, just might be the first of several remote northern communities that are going to ask for the military's help. Already we're hearing from some northern Manitoba First Nations communities that say they'll be overwhelmed unless the Canadian forces pitches in. Nitu.
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Quebec is reporting a sharp jump in COVID-19 related hospitalizations today, climbing by 140 since yesterday. The situation outside of Montreal is especially dire, forcing some regions to make tough decisions. Olivia O'Malley reports.
Hospitals in the Laurentians, north of Montreal, are slammed. All 6 in the area are operating above full capacity. To relieve pressure, the Regional Health Authority says it will move patients who no longer need to be hospitalized to long-term care facilities. In an email to Global News, a spokesperson writes transfers will only concern people who have tested negative for COVID-19, adding when they arrive, they must go through a confinement period of 5 to 10 days.
We were surprised. We're kind of worried. We don't want seniors to be considered as second-grade citizens, and we want to make sure that this is done properly if it has to be done.
The Parti Québécois health critic is concerned mistakes from the first wave could be made again. In March 2020, hospital patients were transferred to the province's long-term care homes to free up beds. Shortly after, the outbreaks began. Nearly 4,000 people died in those facilities at the start of the first wave. In a report, the provincial ombudsman said the government's strategy weakened CHSLDs by putting them in a position of overcapacity.
What we don't want to happen is for the public system to shove the problem into the long care home facilities for them to be overloaded.
Critics worry the influx of patients could strain an already thin staffing situation, resulting in a lack of services. Patients' rights advocates don't agree with transferring patients, but they say if it has to be done, health measures must be followed.
Well, we should be better off, and hopefully they will do and act better, because otherwise we will create another mess and horror and people dying for no reason.
The Laurentian Regional Health Authority says it hopes to return to normal as soon as it can. It's currently the only area in Quebec transferring patients. Critics hope it stays that way. Olivia O'Malley, Global News, Montreal.
In New York, at least 19 people, including 9 children, have been killed in an apartment fire. The 5-alarm fire broke out this morning in a 19-story building in the Bronx. More than 60 people were hurt. At least 13 are in critical condition. Firefighters say they found victims on every floor. The fire is not believed to be suspicious, but the cause is under investigation. It is the deadliest blaze in New York in more than 3 decades. Kazakhstan's health ministry says 164 people were killed during a week of deadly protests that began over a sharp rise in fuel prices. Kazakhstan will be a key sticking point during top-level talks between the U.S. and Russia that begin tomorrow. But the biggest will be Russia's threat against Ukraine and how President Vladimir Putin is amassing troops along the border. Jennifer Johnson reports.
Despite 2 recent tense phone conversations between U.S. President Joe Biden and Russia's leader Vladimir Putin, Russian troops remain near the border with Ukraine. This week, the U.S., backed by its allies, will demand the Kremlin stand down.
There will be massive consequences for Russia if it renews its aggression, by which I mean economic, financial, and other consequences.
That includes cutting off Russian banks from global transactions. But whether Putin is ready to negotiate or finish the job he started in 2014 with the seizure of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula remains a question. The Kremlin wants Ukraine barred from NATO. The White House says that's non-negotiable, but remains hopeful.
Our approach to discussions will be pragmatic, results-oriented, and we believe there are areas we can make progress on.
3 meetings are scheduled, but already Russia's foreign minister is saying talks could break down after the first. Negotiators from NATO and Russia are scheduled to sit down Wednesday.
We need to be prepared for that the talks breaks down and that diplomacy will fail. And that's exactly why we are sending a very clear message to Russia that if they once again decide to use military force against a neighbor, then there will be severe consequences.
The U.S. has said it's open to discussing limits on missile deployments and troop exercises in Europe, but no troop reductions. But fearing a war, the Pentagon has already sent a portion of $60 million worth of military equipment to Ukraine. Ahead of these talks, it's another signal to Putin that it won't just be Ukraine's army to fight should Russian troops invade. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
There were tears of joy on Saturday after relatives were reunited with an Afghan baby boy who went missing in November during the chaos at Kabul's airport. On Saturday, after weeks of negotiations, a 29-year-old taxi driver who found 2-month-old Sohail Ahmad in the airport and has been looking after him ever since agreed to give him back to the boy's grandfather. That's them sitting there. You'll remember these distressing scenes. The baby boy's father worked as a guard for the U.S. Embassy in Kabul and handed Sohail over the wall to a soldier at the exact moment the Taliban took full control. Coming up, will he stay or will he go? The deportation decision for Novak Djokovic. Plus, Canada's critical step in protecting mako sharks from extinction. We have some breaking news to bring you now. Comedian and actor Bob Saget has died at the age of 65. That is according to police, who say Saget was found dead in a hotel room in Orlando, Florida. Officers were called for reports of an unresponsive man, later identified as Saget, who was pronounced dead at the scene. Saget was best known for his role as the jovial dad in the TV sitcom Full House. No official cause of death has been released. It is decision day for Novak Djokovic, who is busy preparing for a different kind of court battle. Whether a judge will allow the world number one a chance to defend his Australian Open title, or if he's set to be deported. The tennis star's supporters have been gathering outside an immigration hotel in Melbourne, where Djokovic is being held. He arrived in Melbourne on Thursday, but his visa was revoked by border agents. Federal authorities have since lost a request to delay the hearing. Lawyers for Djokovic say the 9-time world champion was granted a medical exemption because he tested positive for COVID-19 last month and has since recovered. Conservationists are praising the federal government for helping to save endangered sharks. At a recent international meeting, Canada successfully lobbied for the protection of short-fin mako sharks. It can be found worldwide, including off the coast of Nova Scotia and even into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. As Ross Lord explains, mako numbers are declining, leading to fears they could soon be extinct.
With a top speed of 70 kilometers an hour, makos are considered the fastest sharks in the Atlantic Ocean, swimming long distances well offshore to catch their prey. But the makos themselves are a popular target for their meat and their fins, especially in parts of Europe.
They've just been overfished for years now, and there's been no limits at all on how many you can catch.
For years, Nova Scotia's Ecology Action Centre lobbied in vain at this international conference to protect the endangered short-fin mako. In November, the 52 countries at the Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas agreed with science indicating if harvesters keep fishing the sharks, they could become extinct.
It's consensus based, so if one party doesn't agree, that's it. Like the whole thing goes out the window. And so for some years, the US and the European Union blocked the protection.
The ban prevents harvesters from fishing or keeping makos, even those that are already dead, landed as bycatch on boats that are looking for other fish. To some fishers, the ban goes too far.
We're opposed to regulatory dead discards. It's a bad practice. Okay, you've already killed it. You're now wasting it.
Before the international ban, the federal government had already imposed one in Canadian waters, becoming a champion for shark conservation.
We've seen this big shift over the last 5 years or so with makos and with other sharks, and slowly putting things in place.
The international restrictions are only temporary. They could be overturned by pressure from commercial harvesters, suggesting the makos are not in the clear just yet. Ross Lord, Global News.
Ahead, Africa's ambitious idea, what the Great Green Wall could mean for climate change and migration.
You're watching Global National.
The effects of man-made climate change are expected to be felt most severely in the developing world in the coming decades. Droughts in Africa are already affecting a giant project that itself is trying to hold back the effects of Mother Nature. The so-called Great Green Wall initiative involves replanting billions of hectares across the width of the continent. But as Redmond Shannon reports, the long-term consequences of the plan are still unknown.
Thousands of years ago, what is now the Sahara Desert was green and lush. It dried out as part of a natural cycle of climate change. In recent decades, concerns about ongoing deforestation and desertification led to a plan of action. The Great Green Wall was launched in 2007. The initial idea was to build an 8,000-kilometre long forest from one side of Africa to the other. It would be 15 kilometres wide and be used as a buffer against deforestation. In 2012, the focus shifted from trees to human development. The wall became a set of sustainable land use projects across the belt. So far, it's thought about 15% of the project has been completed. However, drought and maintenance have been issues. This man in Mauritania says he's barely seen any rain in 3 years, so solar-powered pumps are being used to irrigate palm trees. Barriers shield them from the wind so they can shield villages from encroaching sands. The country's environment minister says it shows how the Pan-African project is about more than just planting trees. It's about improving the lives and skills of those involved. This initiative in Senegal looks to do the same. Special circular gardens designed to better resist drought. If successful, the Great Green Wall could also help stem the tide of migration from many parts of Africa.
Any type of geoengineering project, because at the end of the day, this is a sort of a geoengineering project, they have to be validated with scientific studies.
In Montreal, Francesco Pausata is researching what the broader consequences of planting so many trees in these areas would actually be on regional climates.
You know, you think, I'm just planting trees. What is going to happen by planting trees? But actually, the vegetation has a very strong feedback.
He says his ongoing research suggests that could include more rain, but also more extreme temperatures, high and low, as well as more intense monsoons further afield. Project coordinators say billions of dollars more are needed to see the mammoth project completed this decade, even though its long-term consequences are still unknown. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
This is right off the wall as far as community service goes.
Next, the BC man using a transit bus to deliver kindness to strangers. A big wallop of winter isn't exactly the norm on Vancouver Island, so when it does happen, it can be difficult to deal with. In one seaside town, a group of Good Samaritans put their shovels, musical talents, and a borrowed BC transit bus to work to help clear out all the recent snow. Kylie Stanton reports.
Okay to travel? Thank you.
JD Ludlow may drive this bus for a living, but what is it that drives him?
Good question. I wake up every day thinking how I can help others. That's what motivates me.
And so when he saw the forecast for heavy snow, the wheels started turning.
So I thought, you know what? I'm driving a bus. I can drive other shovelers around the valley to help out.
Ludlow, also known as Flower Man, got the word out on social media while securing an out-of-service bus through BC Transit.
The extra bus was available, and JD and his team got out there and really helped out in the community, which is it's what he does.
Musicians to politicians and everyone in between got on board.
Hey!
Then got to work.
Woo! When you show up at a person's driveway in a city bus to, clear the driveway and the doors open, you got a musician playing the music. Well, this is right off the wall as far as community service goes.
Thanks, everyone.
Win-win, for everybody involved, really.
We couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle.
It was a huge relief, and boy, talk about generous.
I'm so glad we found you.
Well, I'm glad. I'm more glad that you found me.
Well,
believe me.
It's proof a little goes a long way, stretching even further when times are tough.
We need to help our neighbors. We've been talking about keeping safe for the last few years, but we also need to look out for each other in other ways too.
Plans are already in motion to continue the work, but for now, the 22 centimeters of snow that blanketed the community is melting.
Thank you very much.
Along with the many hearts touched by this random act of kindness.
I'm so grateful to help others, and that's what drives me every day.
Kylie Stanton, Global News.
What an inspiration. Well, an artist in BC's Haida Gwaii region got extra creative with all that snow. Take a look at these incredible creations by Billy Jovanovic Jr. If you're clearing snow, you may as well keep it beautiful, right? And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Neethu Garcha. Thanks for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.